Hey friends, welcome back to the Lifestyle School podcast. Today, we're diving into a topic that sits underneath so much of the struggle that both women and men experience with their health, with their habits, their energy, their weight, their relationships, and honestly, their sense of self. And that is boundaries. Most people think they're struggling because they don't have enough motivation or maybe discipline, willpower. But the truth is, motivation is not the issue. Willpower is likely not the issue. The real reason is that their life doesn't have the structure, the protection, and the clarity required for those things to work. You can't create consistency in an environment that constantly pulls you out of alignment. You can't build healthy habits when you have no space, no time, and no emotional bandwidth, and no internal or external boundaries protecting the things that you're trying to grow. So, if you feel overwhelmed, if you feel stretched thin, irritated, constantly reactive, or unable to stick to the routines you know that would help you, I want you to know that you're not broken. You're likely boundaryless. Okay. And boundarylessness, if that's a word, living is incompatible with metabolic healing, with nervous system regulation, with restful sleep, with emotional stability, and any long term health change, truly. Today's episode is going to walk you through some of the core principles from the book Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend, but through a deeper, more integrated lens, okay? How boundaries shape your stress hormones, your hunger, your inflammation, your emotional eating, your energy, your consistency, your inner peace, and ultimately your identity. Okay. This isn't just a relational conversation. Really, I want to tie it back to the biological, the physiological, and behavioral blueprint. Okay. And when you understand what boundaries actually are and how they reorganize your life from the inside out, you stop trying to fix symptoms and start fixing the framework everything sits on. Right. Because here at Lifestyle School, we're about taking this whole picture approach. And as always, guys, a quick reminder before we really get into the nitty gritty of today's episode. I want to remind you that I'm not a medical doctor and this is not medical advice. This podcast is for educational purposes only and is, again, not medical advice. If, as always, consult with a qualified healthcare professional before making any major changes to your health, your routine, lifestyle, etc., if necessary. And then again, an exciting announcement before we jump into it. I want to let you know that my online supplement store is officially open. If you've been wanting high quality supplements you can actually trust in regards to where things were sourced, what's in them is actually like on the label is actually in them. This is where to get them. Every product in my store is third-party tested for quality and purity, which is not something you're guaranteed, unfortunately, when you're buying supplements from Amazon or grabbing them wherever it is, whether that's on the shelf of your local grocery store or health food store. These are the same professional grade products that I use and I recommend to my clients. And it's an easy way for you to support me and the Lifestyle School podcast. So if you create your account using code 104567, once again, that code is 104567. You'll need that code to create an account by heading over to my website, www.hopeplatcoaching.com. Yes, you have to put the W's. And then you'll see in the top right corner where it will say store or shop. And if you click on that, that will take you to all the supplements that I have available. Use that code to create your account. And if you want to know exactly where to start when it comes to supplements, go listen to episode 43, where I talk about my core 4 supplement recommendations and why they matter for metabolic health. So with that, guys, let's get into today's episode on boundaries. So let's start with the foundation, right? What are boundaries? That's a great question to define because maybe some of us know a little bit better than others, depending on where we're at in our journey, right? So boundaries are not walls. They're not punishments and they're not ultimatums. Boundaries are simply the lines that define where you end and where someone else begins. I really like that definition. It's where you end and someone else begins. And what they do is they clarify what's yours to carry and what isn't. Okay, I'm going to say that again for the people in the back. Boundaries clarify what's yours to carry and what isn't. Okay. This is a really important distinction. They determine what you say yes to and what you say no to, and what gets your energy and what no longer has access to your energy. Okay. I'm going to repeat that part again because I just think it's so good. Hopefully, that's not like, like a super proud thing to say, but they determine what you say yes to and what you say no to, as well as what gets your energy and what no longer has access to it. Okay. And most people misunderstand boundaries because they think boundaries are something you set for other people, but boundaries are actually something you set for yourself. Okay. About the behaviors you will and won't participate in, the energy that you will and won't allow, and the commitments that you will or won't take on, right? So there are three main types of boundaries. We have physical boundaries. These protect your body, your health, your space, your physical environment, right? And this includes things like what you eat, your sleep, the movement you choose, and the physical environments you allow yourself to stay in, right? We have emotional boundaries. These protect your feelings, your mental capacity, and your internal world. Emotional boundaries, determine whether you absorb other people's emotions or simply witness them, right? Big distinction. They determine whether guilt runs your decision making. They determine whether you tolerate disrespect, things like chaos, drama, or emotional dumping. And then the third type of boundaries are time boundaries. And these protect your schedule, your commitments, and your energy output. Okay. You don't have time boundaries because you don't have time boundaries. If you don't have them, you become chronically overbooked, underrested, and stressed, which directly impacts things like cortisol, right? Your hunger hormones, like we talked about a couple weeks ago, decision fatigue, and your metabolic resilience. And the deeper truth is boundaries are not about controlling other people. Okay. I want to be clear. Boundaries are not about controlling other people. They're about controlling what you will access, engage with, or allow. Okay. They're a declaration of self leadership. And this is where I think so many women struggle because culturally, women have been conditioned to overfunction, emotionally, physically, relationally. You've been conditioned to anticipate the needs of others, to soothe over conflict, maybe absorb others' stress, and sacrifice yourself before you inconvenience someone else. It's a huge issue that I see with coaching and even, sometimes with myself. Over time, this becomes your identity. And, we talk about how important identity is, not because it's who you are, but because it's what you were taught to be. And I want to be clear, boundaries are about the process of reclaiming yourself. Okay. Again, they're not about other people, they're about yourself. And this is really important. So, let's talk about what boundaryless living actually does, not just emotionally, but metabolically and neurologically. Okay. So, living without boundaries forces your nervous system to operate in a constant state of hypervigilance. You're always monitoring, you're always anticipating, reacting, overgiving, and overcompensating. And this gosh, I can't talk, you guys. This overactivation of the sympathetic nervous system raises your cortisol. It disrupts your circadian rhythms, it increases inflammation, and it interferes with our blood sugar regulation. And if you've been listening to the podcast the last couple of weeks, these are all things that we need regulated to be healthy, right? This is not an emotional preference. This is a biological consequence when you don't have boundaries. Okay, so um, when you don't have boundaries, what this looks like is some of the following examples that I have for you. So, overcommitted because you feel obligated to do things, right? You say yes, even when you're depleted, when you should rest. You push through exhaustion. You grab that extra cup of coffee. You take care of others at the expense of your own needs. You tolerate behaviors that drain your mental capacity. Or, you just feel chronically behind or chronically overwhelmed and chronically stressed. But, let's take this even deeper. Chronic overwhelm forces your brain into decision fatigue where the prefrontal cortex becomes less efficient. And, in this state, your brain is more likely to choose what's easy and fast and comforting and familiar. And a lot of times, that's not aligned with our goals. And this is why people who live boundaryless lives often struggle with things like emotional eating, late night snacking, overeating after stress. They skip meals when they really shouldn't. They don't have any structure to their life. And being, quote, good all day and then falling apart at night is just like a normal part of their routine. And I want to be clear, these aren't failures of willpower. I think we blame so much on willpower, but really it's something else. These are symptoms of a nervous system that has been overloaded all day long because you don't have any boundaries. Boundaryless living also destroys our metabolic rhythm. It's the foundation, and our metabolic rhythm is the foundation for weight loss. And without boundaries, you lose time to consistent meal timing, predictable sleep, healthy movement patterns, time to grocery plan, meal prep, time to decompress, the ability sometimes to even self-evaluate and, have that time to really connect with self. And a lot of times it steals that emotional margin required to charge or recharge so that we can operate at a healthy level, right? You simply cannot create a healthy body inside of a chaotic life because chaos elevates cortisol. Elevated cortisol elevates insulin. Elevated insulin locks in hunger. It locks in fat storage and it drives energy crashes. So, boundaryless living is just like a straight shot to metabolic dysregulation and metabolic misalignment. Boundaries are critical to this piece. And when we talk about metabolic health, only about like 12% of the population are metabolically healthy. So I know a large percentage of the population and people listening to this are struggling with boundaries. And so we have to kind of get this piece put in. I do recommend everyone read this book. It's so good. And so I want to talk about a concept from the book, The Law of Responsibility. And one of the most powerful things that they talk about is that you are responsible to people, not for people. Okay. They call this in the book The Law of Responsibility. I think it's one of the most powerful concepts. It's you are responsible to people, okay, to people, not for people. And this principle dismantles the emotional weight that so many people carry unnecessarily. That you are responsible to people. And to be clear, is to be responsible to people, to be honest, to be kind, respectful, and grounded. That is being responsible to people. And what it means when I say you're not responsible for people, it means that you're not responsible for their feelings, for their reactions, their disappointment, or their discomfort when you set a boundary. Okay. You're responsible to people, not for people. And this is where the psychology kind of deepens when we're talking about this, is that many people internalize responsibility. They have internalized responsibility, the belief that they must regulate other people's emotions in order to stay safe, to feel loved or accepted. And that's a really dangerous place to live. And this belief definitely has consequences. Okay. So it leads you to do things like say yes when you mean no. You avoid conflict, even when conflict is actually necessary. You absorb emotional weight that isn't yours. You betray your own needs to maintain harmony. Not good. And you prioritize others' comfort over your own well being, which is really, really harmful. And this pattern often, is learned early. It's not usually chosen, but as an adult, it becomes a quiet force that is sabotaging your health. And I think sometimes we don't even realize it. So let's talk physiology again. When you take responsibility for other people's emotions, their disappointments, their frustrations or expectations, You increase your allostatic load. And what this is this is the cumulative stress burden that drives inflammation, poor sleep, emotional instability, and metabolic dysfunction. Your body is not meant to carry multiple people's emotional world. I think part of this also relates back to like how we're connected via social media to people who we like knew 20 years ago, and we get pulled into carrying their emotional load based on what we see on social media, and we have to be so careful about that. So, taking responsibility for people keeps you in chronic stress. Um, but when you shift that, when you are taking responsibility to people, what it does is it really frees you, right? And here is the health connection. When you reclaim responsibility for your own behavior, your own choices, your own routines, and your own boundaries, your outcomes really start to change. And your metabolism is going to reflect that return to self leadership in a really beautiful way. And so, um, a big part of this process that I end up talking end up talking to my clients about this a lot is saying no. Saying no is one of the most powerful health interventions available and one of the most underutilized. We have to learn to say no because here's the truth. Every yes you give costs something. Every yes requires energy. Every yes you give requires occupied. Every yes you give requires, or sorry, how do I say this? Every yes takes up or occupies mental space. Every yes is a withdrawal from your capacity. And every yes is saying no to something else, right? And most people say yes reflexively because they fear as being seen as difficult or selfish or unhelpful or disappointing. But here's the truth. When you say yes to things that stress you beyond your energetic limits, like what you have energy for, um, your nervous system pays the price, right? You trigger chronic cortisol elevation. It's going to result in sleep disruptions. It's going to result in emotional dysregulation. And it's going to result in stress driven hunger patterns, which are a huge no bueno. Saying no is uncomfortable because it activates the area of the brain associated with social rejection and threat detection. So your brain interprets disappointing someone as a potential danger. And that's why we feel really uncomfortable with saying no. But this discomfort is temporary, right? The consequences of not saying no are much longer lasting. Think of it this way. Every time you say yes to an obligation you don't have capacity for, you say no to something essential for your well being. Okay. I'm going to say it again. Every time you say yes to an obligation or commitment you don't have the capacity for, you're saying no to something essential to your well being, right? It's always the first thing to go, your own well being. Saying yes to another late night is saying no to your circadian rhythm. Saying yes to a draining commitment is saying no to your self-regulation. Saying yes to rescuing others out of whatever situation is saying no to your inner stability. Just saying yes to everything is saying no to the goals that you claim matter most, right? The goals that you've set for yourself in this new year. So saying no isn't selfish. Say it with me. Saying no isn't selfish. It's strategic. Okay. Um, and really saying no is metabolic integrity. It's emotional adulthood, right? Like we have to be adults here and adults can say no, right? And it's self leadership in action. We have to lead ourselves. And it's like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it becomes and the better you're going to get at just being like, no, I'm sorry, I can't do that. And you don't even have to say sorry. You can just say no. I need to be better at not apologizing for things and just being like, no, and not feeling like you have to get a reason. Um, let's talk a little bit about myths that get in people's way when it comes to boundaries. Okay. So I think myth number one is that boundaries are selfish. I want to just touch on these real quick is, healthy boundaries protect relationships by making expectations clear, which is really important for having healthy relationships. The lack of boundaries within relationships breeds resentment, they breed burnout, and they breed conflict, right? So it's not selfish. It's actually super important and good and healthy to put boundaries in relationship because they're actually protective. The second myth is that, if I set boundaries, people are going to be angry. We assume if we say no, if we set a boundary, people are going to be angry. And that's not a fair assumption to make. Obviously, some people will be angry, but their reaction tells you who benefits from your lack of boundaries, right? People who want you healthy and grounded are going to adapt, and they're actually going to be proud of you for being like, oh, I'm glad that you realize like you just don't have the capacity for this. The people who aren't really interested in your health and your success aren't going to respond well. And it just tells you about them, right? The third myth that I want to talk about briefly is that saying no is unkind. I think for some of us, maybe we've been taught that saying no is unkind. And I want to say, no, that's not true. Okay. Saying yes when you mean no is what creates future conflict. It creates, again, resentment and like withdrawal from relationship. And boundaries prevent like negative emotional buildup in relationships. And so it's not unkind to say no. It's actually maybe one of the kindest things you can do to work on having healthy relationships. And then the fourth one is that boundaries will push people away. I will say this, they only push away unhealthy relationships or relationships with unhealthy dynamics. Healthy people respect boundaries because they want you to be well. They don't want you to be depleted and exhausted and overwhelmed. And so, yes, it might push some people away, but it's probably a sign that it's not a healthy relationship to begin with. These myths, I think, sometimes keep people stuck in lives that are too small for who they are trying to become, right? Because you're just drained. Everything is kind of taken, stolen from other people because you haven't set these boundaries for yourself. And so I think evaluating these myths, like, do I believe any of these myths? And then breaking these myths is essential for changing your health story because, like, I've said, you have to make space to become a different type of person. You have to make space, and then you have to change your identity, right? If you truly want to change your health, your weight for the long term, not just for like a 30-day challenge, you have to change the way you think about these things to really see success long term. Because here's where transformation happens. Boundaries are not behavior change. They're really connected more to identity change, okay? Every time you set a boundary, you reinforce a new identity, which is a big, step in this process. When we talked about the 5 steps to change in 2025, the first episode of 2026, or yeah, if, I said the wrong year. You know what I mean. But every time you set a boundary, that is going to reinforce the new identity that you need to have to be the person who cares about their health, who prioritizes their health, and who is healthy, right? So it's like, I'm someone who honors my energy. I'm someone who protects my peace. I'm someone who follows through on my commitments to myself. And I'm someone who no longer abandons myself to, other people and their needs and their desires. Identity is what drives consistency. Behavior follows belief, and boundaries are a way of living out your new identity in real time. Most people don't fail because they lack knowledge. They fail because their identity is still rooted in self-sacrifice or guilt or chaos or people pleasing. And what happens is boundaries disrupt that identity and rebuild a stronger one. And so this is why inside Lifestyle School, So much of the work that we do is about returning to self-leadership. And when I say lifestyle school, I mean my course, Lifestyle School for Weight Loss. When you change how you see yourself, your choices change naturally without forcing, without obsessing, and without white knuckling it. Really, boundaries are the scaffolding for your new identity. And so here is where, your world and the world of boundaries really merge completely. Excuse me, because boundaries do something powerful. They create predictability, they create structure, it creates safety. And that exact condition is what your biology needs to heal. Like our bodies need the predictability, the structure, the safety to heal. And when you set boundaries around your time, your emotions, your stress load, and your commitments, things like your cortisol start to stabilize, right? You're not in fight or flight constantly. Your blood sugar becomes more predictable, right? Which is going to help your hunger hormones to regulate, which is going to help you get better, deeper sleep, and your inflammation is going to go down, and the decision fatigue lightens, and your cravings start to calm down and lose their intensity, and your brain becomes more clear and you can think straight, and your capacity for consistency within this new life that you're building truly expands, because you can't regulate insulin while living in a chronic sympathetic activated state, right? You can't reduce inflammation while living in a constant state of emotional reactivity, and you can't heal your metabolism while giving everyone else unlimited access to your energy. It just doesn't work that way. Boundaries are not separate from health. They are the container that allows health to grow. And when you create boundaries, you create space, like literal biological space for your body to shift into a parasympathetic healing mode. You create the safety required for metabolic repair, and your biology thrives on rhythm, and boundaries restore rhythm, and they make space for rhythm to be there. So let's anchor this in some real world application, not stories, but just like clear categories, okay, to kind of help you see how can this be applicable in your own life. So things like food boundaries, I don't keep foods in the house that trigger dysregulated eating. That can be a big boundary. Or I eat at consistent times that support my blood sugar, or I don't negotiate my first meal just because the day gets chaotic. These could be some good boundaries. They could be boundaries that you need to also communicate to other people. What food boundaries do is they reduce decision fatigue and they stabilize blood sugar. You could have kitchen boundaries. So, I'm not the sole person responsible for meals. That can be a big one. And, sharing that with a partner, if you have, and, if you have maybe kids who are older, or maybe you have a lot of small kids and it's just too much, right? And one night a week, you don't cook dinner, and that's creating like a good, healthy boundary. The kitchen closes at a certain time each night. For me, this is a big one that I do. Because it'll be 8 o'clock and I'll be like, okay, kids, it's time to go to bed. And they'll be like, oh, I'm starving. And it's like, I've already, I made them a nice dinner. They ate. I encouraged them to eat until they felt satisfied. I cleaned up the kitchen. Now I'm finally sitting down to unwind and start my like evening routine. And they're like, I'm starving. And I'm not going to open up the kitchen and create this mess. It's like, if you were hungry, you should have had more at dinner. And just having that boundary, I think, is super helpful. Or, in regards to kitchen boundaries, I prep in ways that support my weekday stress load. I do food prep in a way that's supportive of that. What this does is it keeps your environment aligned with your goals, right? Social boundaries could look like I'm not available for conversations that drain me after 8 p.m., right? Like you see someone calling and you just don't answer the phone, right? You're moving towards bedtime and you're protecting that space. Or it could look like, I don't take on emotional labor that isn't mine, right? So social boundaries protect the nervous system. They're so important. Um, More examples of boundaries is we have like phone or tech boundaries. Your phone stays, maybe your phone stays outside your bedroom, or you don't respond immediately to people unless it's urgent, right? Tech boundaries, they protect sleep, they protect circadian rhythm, they can protect your cortisol, super important. Sleep boundaries are a big one. Obviously, I'm sure you're probably not surprised, always talking about sleep around here, but my bedtime is non-negotiable except for true emergencies. For me, this is a big one. Evening screen time has limits. It can be a big one. And if you have, if you're in a relationship and one person is big into screens at night and the other one isn't, you got to sometimes set boundaries around that, because sleep boundaries literally change your metabolic outcomes, because sleep is so foundational to being healthy. We just got through the holidays, but February is just around the corner. We got Valentine's Day. Valentine's Days, but then there's like just the events that happen, and having boundaries around them can also be a big part of the process. Maybe an example of an event boundary is we're going to be there for 2 hours, not all day. Especially if it's an environment that is a bit of a mismatch for you, or maybe it's like we're leaving at a time that protects sleep and routine, not staying up too late. Events don't need to derail our health, but we do have to have boundaries, right? And just like general scripts for setting boundaries, like I said, I don't think we need to be saying sorry all the time, but saying things like, that doesn't work for me, or, I'm not available for that, or I'm choosing not to commit to that right now. I say things like that to my kids. I'm choosing not to commit to that right now, or it depends. But I like the whole I'm not choosing to commit to that right now, because right, we have to set a boundary, what we're willing and not willing to do. You can just say no thank you, or I'm not responsible for that. These are just general things you can do to reinforce a boundary. And I want to say, and I've heard someone else say this, and I can't remember who, but clarity is kindness. Okay, being clear with people, clarity is kindness. And what clarity does is it protects our bandwidth, our space, our mental clarity, and our physiology. And so let's talk about what to expect when you start living with boundaries, because this might be like a whole new thing for you. And it's a bit of an arc or a curve that happens. Okay. Phase one, and they talk about this in the book, is the guilt phase. Okay. So like I said earlier, nervous system interprets no as a danger. You maybe feel selfish. You feel like you're second guessing everything. That's normal. Okay. But you just got to keep with it with the boundaries. Phase number 2 is you might come against some pushback. Okay. This is the pushback phase. People who benefited from your lack of boundaries will test your new ones, right? This doesn't mean your boundaries are wrong. It means that they're working. Okay. So stay firm. Phase 3 is the awkward phase. So maybe you feel clunky, you over-explain, you fear disappointing people. But you have to retain your line in the sand. This is really going to help your nervous system. You got to just move through this awkward phase, and then you're going to eventually find yourself in the self-trust phase. Okay. Phase number 4. You start experiencing the benefits, right? You have more time, you have more peace, more clarity, more consistency. And then this eventually will lead into phase 5, which is the freedom phase. Your life becomes spacious, your body becomes regulated, and your habits stick because they're finally supported. Okay. Boundaries are uncomfortable at first for many people, but they are so liberating once you have really set them and gone through these phases and you feel confident in them. It is so liberating. And so, in closing, guys, I wanted to say to you, boundaries are not a luxury. Okay. They're a requirement for a healthy, stable, aligned life. They shape your stress levels, your hunger cues, your emotional regulation, your inflammation, your sleep, your ability to follow through on the habits that support long-term health and metabolic health. Your body can't heal in chaos. Your metabolism can't thrive in chronic overwhelm. Your nervous system can't regulate when you have no space to breathe. Okay, so start small, choose one boundary this week, practice it consistently. Let yourself feel the discomfort, okay? Because on the other side of that discomfort is strength, there's clarity, there's peace, and there's freedom. And these moments where you draw a line are the moments you begin to rewrite the story of your life. And, if you're ready to take things deeper in this work, if you're ready to just really start working on rebuilding your health, your routines, your metabolic foundation, and your identity with guidance and strategy and support, I'd love to invite you into my Lifestyle School for Weight Loss course, which can be found on my website at www.hopepotcoaching.com. Yes, you do need those W's when you type it into your web browser. Lifestyle School is where you learn how to live a lifestyle that supports metabolic health for the long haul. It's like the whole goal is like, we want it to be a lifestyle, right? We talk fasting, nutrition, stress regulation, circadian rhythm, boundaries, identity, emotional work, and everything in between. And this is where we rebuild your foundation so your body can finally respond to the way it can respond in the way you've always wanted it to, right? You're working with your body and not against it. And if you want like a higher level of support, I also offer a personalized 8-week one-on-one coaching program where we get laser focused on your labs, your routines, your blind spots, your metabolism, and the patterns that have been holding you back. It's intimate, it's tailored, and it's designed to kind of accelerate your transformation versus just going through the 8-week course. But you do have to do them in conjunction with each other if you want to do one-on-one coaching. So I want to say, if this episode resonated with you, if you feel yourself soften or strengthened, or maybe you see yourself in a new way, I want to encourage you to take the next step. You don't have to do this alone. And I want to just encourage you to, and just say you can do it. You can be the person who sets boundaries and sticks by them, and you're worth it. I also want to say that you are worth it. Your health is worth it. Don't go another day sacrificing your health on the altar of trying to please people, because it will never work out in a positive, beneficial way. Before you guys go, if this helps, where is my brain going? Before you go, hang with me, guys. It would be so much help to me. It would support the show if you would like this episode, subscribe, share the episode with a friend, leave a comment, take a screenshot, post it on your social media, tag me at hopepotcoaching.com, or not .com, hopepotcoaching on Instagram or Facebook. So we can spread the message about this podcast if you find that it's been helpful, so you can help others start that journey to reclaim their health, their identity, and their lives. I'd be so blessed and honored if you would do that. As always, guys, thank you so much for being here. I so appreciate your time. Thank you for doing the work to be your healthiest self. And with that, we'll see you on the next episode of the Lifestyle School podcast.